Good evening, I'm Jason Vio. Katarina is away today. This is CBC Windsor News. Thank you so much for watching. Tonight, a Windsor law prof speaking to MPs about bail reform, and some say he was at the receiving end of a racist interaction. Plus, Windsor police have made an arrest and seized multiple replica firearms. This after a 4-hour standoff in the Walkerville area last night. A massive St. Patrick's Day celebration across our region today. It started early for some. We'll bring you all of the highlights tonight. And a little soup shack on wheels has a new home in our city. They help give people who are homeless a free, warm meal. The head of the Black Studies Institute right here at the University of Windsor is calling the behavior of one Ontario MP racist. It stems from an exchange at a parliamentary committee hearing involving a Windsor law professor.
I've taken some notes of some pretty inflammatory language that you're using that, in my view, as a former Crown attorney, is not reality.
University of Windsor Assistant Law Professor Donardo Jones testified last week before a federal committee examining Canada's bail system. He pointed to inequities in Canada's judicial system for racialized and marginalized people.
My bringing that up is not the problem. As I said, this is evidence that is readily available to all of us, and it's evidence that's been compiled over the last 30 years. This is something that our courts, the highest court in our country, has recognized and has said over and over and over again that we need to confront this issue.
One example he provided was the racial profiling by police. When that happens, he says that leads to an over-incarceration of Black and Indigenous people. And since bail is based on credibility, Jones says that puts racialized people on an unfair playing field.
And if we're going to pretend as if it's not an issue, then we have a lot of work. We have a lot of work on our hand.
Now, where are you getting this data from?
The Supreme Court of Canada has said it over and over and over again.
Right.
And also
we have Antic.
This was one instance where Brock interrupted Jones. Here's how that interaction ended.
So I find it rather offensive that you're just using this broad stroke to categorize the Crown system and the judicial system when it comes to marginalized individuals, Black and Indigenous, as not receiving a fair shake in our bail system.
This is not my language. The courts have said it, and the courts mentioned it from 1993 in a case called R.V. Parks. This is not my language, that the system is profoundly anti-Black. That's Justice Doherty's language.
To Ms. Vlistra. Ms. Vlistra, apart from the small period of time that Professor Jones has actually practiced law,
now, the Black Studies Institute at the University of Windsor has sent Brock a letter indicating they'll be filing a complaint against him with the Law Society of Ontario. The letter went on to read, "In treating Professor Jones as an imposter, pretender, and someone unworthy of civility, you enacted all of the anti-Black tropes that we at the Black Studies Institute have worked to counteract." The University of Windsor's racialized academics and advocates centering equity and solidarity also sent a letter to the institution's president calling for action. They too say this interaction makes Jones a target of racism and are calling on the University of Windsor to defend him. CBC News requested an interview with Brock. Instead, the press secretary with Pierre Poilievre, leader of the official opposition, sent a statement attributed to Brock himself. It says, "At a time of rising crime, when people of color are disproportionately the victims of violent crime and repeat violent offenders are repeatedly released on our streets with ease, all Canadians, regardless of race, color, or creed, deserve to have an honest debate on what's happening in our country. For elected officials in a parliamentary committee, that means asking questions." In the end, Jones describes this interaction as very uncomfortable and unexpected, but doesn't want it to detract from the issue of bail reform. Windsor police have seized a number of what they call replica firearms following a standoff yesterday night. Police say 2 men barricaded themselves in a home in the 1000 block of Lincoln Road for several hours after they attempted to execute a search warrant. The standoff ended peacefully at 9 p.m. Police say 1 man was arrested on an outstanding warrant. Another man was released without charges, but as the investigation continues, that may change. Police say the weapons will be tested to validate if they are replicas and can cause harm or possibly death. Police say charges could be laid after the testing of the guns is complete. Movement today in the ongoing Windsor salt strike. The union and the company will be heading back to the bargaining table. This update coming from a joint statement released by both parties. Members first went on strike a month ago. Union officials have said that the company had refused to negotiate a new contract. The two sides started talking in the last 24 hours. They'll meet in a formal session next week. The Soup Shack food trailer has found a new home.
We were getting very, very sad and feeling like we wouldn't be able to find a new home.
Marissa Mills of the Street Angels agency says she's happy now. The trailer feeds people who are homeless. It lost its home downtown in November when the owner of the property where it was parked could no longer accommodate them. It had only been operating 1 day a week at a location on Drouillard until now. Parkwood Gospel Temple bought the outreach center at the corner of Parent and Wyandotte and has offered Street Angels a place to park the trailer for free. It serves about 40 to 50 people every night from 7 to 9 p.m. It started operations last night.
Oh, it's been super successful. We're seeing high numbers, and I do think that with the new location, we're going to see an increase in service users as well, so that's excellent. So this is actually a temporary accommodation. We are here probably for 3 to 6 months, but right now we're looking into a permanent location just a block away where we could stay stationed permanently.
The investigation continues in Edmonton today into the fatal shooting of 2 police officers yesterday. Police say the teenage suspect in the case killed himself and wounded his mother. Constables Travis Jordan and Brett Ryan were shot and killed while responding to a family violence call. Their deaths have stunned the community and their fellow officers. The CBC's Aaron Collins has this report.
The day after 2 Edmonton police officers were shot and killed, this community is still reeling. Residents compelled to reach out any way they can. This line of flowers growing outside the West Division Police Station in Edmonton. People moved to come here to pay their respects to the 2 fallen officers.
Anytime something like this happens, it hits so close to home, and every police officer gives so much of their time and of their family life and of their health, and some police officers give everything.
The constables Travis Jordan and Brett Ryan worked out of this station. The 2 officers shot responding to a domestic call early yesterday. Investigators say it appears the 2 constables didn't even have time to return fire before being gunned down. Their deaths stunning this former Edmonton police officer.
Not anticipated. And just speaking about it now makes it even more emotional, because it's not something you can really be prepared for.
The colleagues of the fallen officers were also caught off guard. The last time a police officer in Edmonton died on duty was 2015. This wound still raw for Edmonton police, but the show of support from the community they've sworn to protect helps.
This is impacting each and every one of us to our absolute core. We're feeling this, we're carrying this, we're owning this.
So as police mourn the loss of 2 of their own, an Edmonton family is mourning too. The 16-year-old who killed the 2 constables killed himself as well. He also shot his mother, who remains in hospital. This tragedy, one that ripples across this city. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Edmonton.
After the sudden retirement of RCMP's first female leader, Ottawa today named the new interim commissioner. The deputy commissioner will be in charge as the search continues for a permanent replacement. Michael Duhem has held prominent roles in the RCMP over the last 30 years. Brenda Lucky retires today after a controversial tenure. She faced allegations of political interference and was criticized for her response to accusations of sexism and racism within the RCMP. It has paid millions of dollars settling gender-based harassment complaints. Ottawa says it's looking for someone to commit to reforming the culture of Canada's National Police Force. In more local news, the stars have all aligned today. It's Friday, March break, and it's St. Patrick's Day, of course. This is the first time people have been able to truly celebrate without any COVID-19 restrictions. TJ Deere now with a look at how Windsor is celebrating.
For some Windsor residents, St. Patrick's Day celebrations would happen later in the evening.
Me and my friends are just going to go out and have some drinks and just have a good time.
We're hoping they have some green brew since it's a brew house. And yeah, having some fun and relaxing before we have to study for our finals.
We're going to have a scuff and a scoff, eat potatoes.
For others, the party was underway earlier. With live music, the Manchester was a spot downtown where a few people had gathered to celebrate. One person was celebrating her birthday.
We celebrate it every year. We celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and I'm just lucky it's my birthday.
But the place to be was Kildare House. The pub was almost full at 11 o'clock this morning. People there were happy to be celebrating, even the pub's owner.
We got some great entertainment, great staff. Let's have a great time today. This is what it's all about.
A tent was set up next door where people could go and celebrate. While it wasn't so busy at 11 a.m., it got much busier a couple hours later. A security guard said the capacity of the tent was around 425 people, which was eventually reached. So much so, a line started to form outside the tent going up Kildare Road. Live music was playing here as well. Everybody was excited to be celebrating St. Patrick's Day for the first time since the pandemic paused massive celebrations. Even one of the younger folks was excited.
I'm very excited.
What are you going to do today?
I don't know yet.
What do you like about St. Patrick's Day?
The leprechaun's here.
Live music will be playing here until 11 p.m. tonight. St. Patrick's Day is back, and the crowd at Kildare House proves it. TJ Deere, CBC News, Windsor.
An Ontario woman who claims she was scalded by a cup of tea is suing Tim Hortons. She alleges the cup was defective and the tea too hot. As we hear from CBC's Talia Ricci, she wants to warn others about the risk. But first, a warning, this story contains graphic images of burned skin.
It's tough.
Jackie Lansing says all she did was pick up her cup of Tim Hortons tea from her car's cup holder when the cup collapsed, spilling the scalding hot liquid all over her.
Of course, you start to scream because it hurts. I picked it up normally. I didn't try and take off the top or anything. I just picked it up.
This happened back in May. She was with her sister at the time who drove her to the hospital in Huntsville.
I was in there for about 5 hours with ice packs on it and on morphine because it was so painful. They were open wounds, bleeding.
It would be the first of many more visits to the hospital after suffering second-degree burns to approximately 6% of her body. For a period of time, she was going daily to get her bandages changed. One of the wounds got infected. Lansing says after Tim Hortons' head office didn't get back to her, her family encouraged her to get a lawyer. They're suing for $500,000 in damages. Tim Hortons declined to comment while the matter is before the courts. The defendants, the Tim Hortons Canadian franchisor, and the owner of the location deny any allegations of negligence. The statement of defense argues the defendants, their agents, and staff fulfilled all duties of care in regards to the sale and delivery of hot beverages, and that even if the spill was a result of the condition of the cup, it was not in any way caused or contributed to by any breach of care or duty on the part of the defendants. This lawyer, who's not involved in the case, says lawsuits against restaurants claiming damages for hot beverage burns are common.
As long as you're able to prove that something was done out of the ordinary, that there was some negligence here, then you should be successful in a case like this. But there are always risks, right? And one thing that I always warn every one of my clients or potential clients about is the risk of contributory negligence on the plaintiff.
Lansing says 10 months later, she still has sore red scars on her stomach, and the back of her legs are sensitive to sunlight and heat. This doctor says he sees cases of burns and scalds from hot water often.
And I think awareness of prevention strategies for companies businesses serving hot fluids, and also to just for everybody to be aware of first aid. That's important. You could avoid long-term effects by just applying that.
Lansing hopes sharing her story provokes change.
The water does not have to be that hot. It doesn't. I don't want this to happen to anyone else.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
This next story is being called a truly Canadian act of kindness by many on social media. It happened when a driver forgot they left a cup of coffee on the roof of their car and sped away. But not to worry, someone who watched it all unfold swooped in with a double rescue. And it was all captured on video, of course.
That's the most Canadian thing I've ever seen.
I saw this car drive by with a coffee cup stuck to the roof. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's going to spill or cause an accident. And I kind of just turned my phone to the side. Another car rushed up beside it.
I saw the coffee on his car. Actually, I wrap cars, and that's actually why I noticed it, because I didn't want the paint to get damaged from the coffee.
I immediately thought, this is the most Canadian thing I've ever seen. Someone jumping out of their car in the freezing cold to save another person's Tim Hortons.
I think everybody's left like a coffee or something on the roof before, right? I put my four-ways on, just kind of ran over and gave a little tap. So, I gave him his coffee. He's like, hey, right on, bro.
So nice.
I think it's hilarious that people are saying that it's a true Canadian heritage moment, and they're saying it's like a Canadian hero thing. I just think it's so funny. You don't mess with a Canadian person's Tim Hortons.
Here's your drink, sir.
Still to come here on CBC Windsor News Live at 6, a chance for flurries over the weekend and then temps rising a bit. We'll have all of your weather details coming up next. Time now for a weather update as we take a live look outside on this St. Patrick's Day. Not exactly patio weather out there, but as you saw, people are still finding a way to have some fun. Cloudy right now, dipping to a -2 overnight, but the wind chill will have it feeling like -10. Tomorrow, we can expect flurries during the day, and that wind really doing a number on us. It's going to feel like -15 with the wind chill tomorrow. You're going to want to bundle up for the final days of March break. Climate change doesn't usually provide solutions for the problems it creates, but in Canada's Arctic, research shows large riverbanks eroding less quickly than expected, and newly flourishing plant species may be the reason. The CBC's Leanie Lambrink has the story.
The Arctic willow can be a nuisance. An elder living in Norman Wells says it regularly needs to be cleared from cabins and trails in the NWT's Sawtoo region.
The moose, they enjoy that. But for a human being, I think it's just getting harder for a person to get from point A to point B.
But the Arctic willow is also getting credit for the power of its roots. This is satellite imagery of Big River on Banks Island in the NWT. Researchers used images like this to see how 10 big rivers in the Arctic have moved over the past 50 years. They were testing a long-held assumption in the scientific community that as the climate warms and permafrost thaws, riverbanks would erode and meander more.
But really, we found exactly the opposite result.
Yelpy chalks it up to plants, like the Arctic willow.
Permafrost might be degrading, but this effect is compounded with the much stronger effect of greening in the Arctic, specifically related to expansion of plants like shrubs, like Arctic willow. Is very much capable of anchoring channel banks and limiting erosion.
A permafrost expert who wasn't involved in the research says the study is robust.
There's a broad consensus that the tundra, the delta is getting shrubbier.
Coquel and Yelpy share another consensus. Just because big Arctic rivers are migrating more slowly, it doesn't mean that smaller rivers, like the Yellowknife River here behind me, are behaving the same way. Yelpy says there's an opportunity now to test the hypothesis for smaller rivers. Leanie Lambrink, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Still to come here on CBC Windsor News, protesting fires and a police response in France. We'll take you there next. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin. It accuses him of illegally deporting children from Ukraine, a war crime.
It is forbidden by international law for occupying powers to transfer civilians from the territory they live in to other territories. Children enjoy special protection under the Geneva Convention.
Is unlikely, though, although Putin could face arrest if he traveled to an ICC member state. Russia dismisses the move as meaningless, stressing it is not a member. Moscow acknowledges bringing children from Ukraine to Russia, but characterizes it as rescuing orphans and abandoned children from a war zone. Anger is building in France today after hundreds were arrested overnight in clashes with police over the government's sudden approval of pension changes. Crowds set off fires on the streets of Paris last night. Police fought back with tear gas. Today, many politicians are calling for protection. The clashes come after the government of Emmanuel Macron yesterday bypassed a parliamentary vote and approved changes to France's public pension. People will now have to wait 2 more years to qualify as the age of eligibility rises from 62 to 64. Opposition parties call the move undemocratic and are threatening a non-confidence vote on Monday. Meanwhile, city workers are still on strike, and the streets of Paris are covered in mounds of rotting garbage. Unions say more job action is likely. With the campaign against global warming receiving new urgency, some are directing new attention to pension fund investment in the energy sector. The CBC's Jayla Bernstein reports.
Climate change weighs heavy on the minds of many young Canadians, a reason why some teachers want their pensions to stop funding fossil fuels.
I think the really meaningful thing is moving money based on the investment.
While the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan has started to green its portfolio, Natasha Bartels is questioning its priorities after learning a new board member also sits on the boards of 4 different oil and gas companies.
I think there's this sort of ideological rift.
Those concerns echoed in a recent report by sustainable finance organization Shift Action. It called out top pension funds for greenwashing and a lack of credible climate-aligned pathways.
Are those directors who are on the boards of fossil fuel companies bringing the interests of advancing oil and gas to that board, or are they looking out for the best interests of 21 million Canadians who, of course, need a climate-safe future to retire into?
These pension fund managers are among Canada's largest, with nearly $2 trillion in net assets. CBC verified each has at least one executive or board member actively involved in oil or gas, overseeing companies like Imperial Oil and Suncor. Most funds did not respond to CBC's questions about their ties with fossil fuels. Those that did dismissed concerns, saying their directors are chosen for their range of skills and expertise.
There's nothing wrong with a director being on more than one board. There's nothing in law that prohibits you from doing so.
Push for change, says this law professor, should come another way.
Write to your pension fund tomorrow. Tell them what we're really committed to is net zero by 2030 or whatever goal it is that you want them to do.
In Canada, only Quebec's pension manager has committed to excluding oil producers. But both New York State's and Europe's largest pension funds are dropping fossil fuel stocks. Inspiration for people like Natasha Bartels, who hope to convince their pensions to follow suit.
I think the work of grown-ups is to be moving this money away from the destruction of our planet, and I think we can do it.
Jayla Bernstein, CBC News, Montreal.
Many of us have at least one of those frustrating airport stories, whether it's a delayed flight, lost bags, or missed connections. But at one Canadian airport, volunteers are bringing in their furry friends to help shake off some of that travel stress. Okay. Dogs and sometimes their cat sidekicks roam the terminal, greeting passengers during peak travel time. The program slowed down during the peak months of COVID travel restrictions, but it's once again picking up pace. Turns out petting a pup before takeoff can help soothe anxieties and make people quite happy. That's it for us here at CBC Windsor News. Thank you so much for watching. Tonight on The National, Canadian films are having a moment. 3 movies from Canadian filmmakers made in Toronto, Vancouver, and Burlington hit the screens this month. But with generally low box office numbers, how do Canadian filmmakers define success? That's tonight on The National. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night and a great weekend.